Well, the images suggest those of concentration camps, families being cut apart, children ripped from their parents. What country would do this? What good country would allow it? This is Donald Trump's doing. What we are seeing is what he wanted people to see, wanted desperate people on the other side of the border to see, wanted Americans to see, and wanted Democrats to see, so they would build his wall. But is this a step too far? Donald Trump said he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. Is separating kids from their parents what he had in mind? Is this proof of what he can get away with? Or is it beyond even what his people will swallow? Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. Our Father's Day weekend, over it, President Trump and his administration came under intense criticism for their so-called zero-tolerance immigration policy, resulting in forced family separations. Much of the mounting public outcry was sparked by images like these of small children looking on as U.S. Border Patrol officers detain their parents. Then there are the newly released recordings of sobbing children at a detention facility. NBC News has obtained the following audio from a civil rights attorney who said he received it from a client. Let's listen.
¿De dónde son ustedes? ¿Y tú? Guatemala. No llores. Vas a llegar con... Mira, ella te va a explicar y te va a ayudar. ¿Cierto, Consulado?
¿Te va a pasar con su consulado?
Papá.
NBC has not been able to independently authenticate that recording. Well, late today, DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen doubled down on the policy, refusing to apologize. Instead, she insisted the administration would continue to prosecute all criminals.
DHS is no longer ignoring the law. We are enforcing the laws as they exist on the books. As long as illegal entry remains a criminal offense, DHS will not look the other way.
Despite the mounting pressure, the president has also pushed back against criticism.
Immigration is the fault and all of the problems that we're having, because we cannot get them to sign legislation. We cannot get them even to the negotiating table. And I say it's very strongly the Democrats' fault. The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility. Won't be.
Seeking to deflect, the president has continuously laid blame at the feet of Democrats. But those comments contradict statements by his own attorney general and chief of staff who helped champion this policy.
I have put in place a zero-tolerance policy for illegal entry on our southwest border. If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you. And that child may be separated from you as required by law.
A big name of the game is deterrence.
And so family separation stands as a pretty tough deterrent.
Could be a tough deterrent. A much faster turnaround on asylum seekers.
Even though people say that's cruel and heartless to take a mother away from her children.
Yeah, I think cruel and heartless, I wouldn't put it quite that way. The children will be taken care of.
Yeah.
They'll put into foster care or whatever. But the big point is they elected to come illegally into the United States. And this is a technique that no one hopes will be used extensively or for very long.
Well, according to the New York Times, zero tolerance, which the administration proudly rolled out back in May, is the brainchild of senior policy advisor Stephen Miller. Miller told the New York Times that rolling out the policy was a simple decision by the administration. The Washington Post is also reporting that the president is seeing political advantage in all of this. According to White House officials, the president has calculated that he will gain political leverage in congressional negotiations by continuing to enforce a policy he claims to hate. Joining me right now is NBC News White House correspondent Kristen Welker, Peter Baker's chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Jennifer Rubin's opinion writer for the Washington Post, and NBC's Jacob Soboroff is outside one of the country's largest immigration processing centers down in McAllen, Texas. I want to start with Kristen. Kristen, it seems like, as they used to say in the old cowboy movies, this administration is speaking with a forked tongue. Two different messages coming out at the same time. One is, this is our policy of zero tolerance, and we believe in it. We got to separate the children. We got to put these parents on trial. And the other statement coming out from the Secretary of Homeland Security was, oh, yeah, and by the way, if you want to change this, go ahead and do it, because we'd like you to do that. We want to change the policy we believe in. That makes no sense to a person listening.
I think that's why this is such a growing crisis for this administration. You heard those two different messages on display in the briefing that was given by DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, and then Sarah Sanders, who came to the podium just moments later, who really stressed that the president hates this policy, wants to see it changed, is bothered by it. Secretary Nielsen really dug in on the fact that, look, this is a crisis that was created by past administrations. Is it a policy that this president is responsible for or not? I tried to press Kirstjen Nielsen on that very point and said, look, the bottom line is this started when the attorney general announced that zero tolerance policy. If the president hates it, why doesn't he pick up the phone and change it? She, of course, punted. She put the blame on Congress, Chris, but it's becoming very difficult for them to explain this and to, frankly, be on the same page.
It looks to me, you know, covering politics all these years and looking at her, she did a very good job today of defending what can't be defended. Basically, they want to change the policy, but they're proud of it. Is she in detention? Is she on the line right here for her job?
I think this is a critical test for her. We know that she was essentially picked by Chief of Staff John Kelly. Ultimately, President Trump got on board with this, but there have been some tensions behind the scenes, some differences of approach. At some points, the president has expressed the fact that he doesn't feel as though she's securing the border enough. And so I think this is a critical test. That briefing was a critical test for her. Will she be able to keep this up? That's a big question. He undoubtedly was watching that briefing today, and she faced a lot of tough questions, Chris.
Well, last question to you, and this is the one I want your answer on. You're on television, you broadcast, you get the message across. I try to do the same thing. The president is very good at creating reality TV. He creates a world through television. This is a television show that nobody wants to watch. No American wants to watch kids and hear them crying. Kids crying when they normally cry at church is fine. But these kids are crying because of policy, because their parents have been taken away from them. That's why they're crying. How can the president defend what he knows is a lousy reality show?
I think he's struggling to do it, Chris. I think you saw that when he surprised us and came out here on the North Lawn on Friday, and we peppered him with questions about this, the humanity of it. He got very upset and pointed the finger at Democrats. That's his tactic right now, to point the finger at Democrats. It's a tough argument to make, though, because, of course, this is his own zero tolerance policy. I do think that we have seen President Trump dig in when it comes to having a fight. He rarely backs away from a tough fight, Chris, and we're watching that unfold right now, even though, as you rightfully point out, these images are not what Americans want to see. It's not what the president, it's not what the first lady wants to be watching. I think the question is, will he at any point back away from this fight? Just tonight, we learned that Senator Ted Cruz is introducing emergency legislation. So the pressure is mounting on this president to do something. He knows that he does have the power to do it. The question is, will he?
Kristen, it's great watching you today. I love the back and forth. I think you hit them right on the head with the problem, the contradiction in this policy, a policy they claim they invented, and they want to get rid of it, but they blame the Democrats for not getting rid of it. This is crazy talk. Let me go to Jacob Soboroff, who's down at the reality that exists down there, not just a TV show. Jacob, tell us what you see down there, what we should know.
Well, let me just also sing Kristen's praises, Chris. She asked the question that we still don't have an answer to, which is, where are the toddlers? Where are the girls? We've been given access to 2 of 100 facilities run by Health and Human Services across the country where these separated child migrants are being held. And I've been in one of them. NBC's Gadi Schwartz has been in another. We haven't seen any girls or toddlers. What we do know, and what I would like to know, what the president would react if he got to see what I saw in that facility, is that 1,100 young kids have been separated from their family right here in the Rio Grande Valley Border Patrol sector. And in this building right here, the McAllen Processing Center, there were 1,200 people last night. And when you walk in there, and there's talk of, are there cages, are there not cages, what do you want to call them? Let me tell you something right now. There are cages. They look like dog kennels. There are not just adults or families together. There are young children sitting in there, and an increasing number of young children are sitting in those cages because they were separated from their parents, and more are being separated every single day. It makes you sick to look at, and I would like to know what the president would think if he was actually inside there. Would he feel the same way? The Secretary of Homeland Security said she's been down here and she's been inside these detention centers. I'd like to know, has she been down here since the separation policy was put into place? Has she talked to the Border Patrol agents who say They're stressed that even if they support this policy, they don't have the resources to keep up. The 4 social workers that were in there last night having to deal with an increasing number of children separated from their parents because of this very policy. And it's not a Democratic policy. It's a policy put into place by Donald Trump.
Well, who put together the policy of separating boys from girls and younger kids from the older kids? That is really concentration camp stuff. It's Sophie's choice kind of thing. Is that a decision made at the border? Did Trump call that in from the bench? How did that get? Who put that policy together, letting you see the older boys, not the younger boys and not the girls? Who told them not to let you see the girls and the younger boys? Who did that?
The shelters are controlled by the Department of Health and Human Services. And I actually do want to say those facilities are run by professional, competent child care professionals, licensed professionals, doctors in those facilities, licensed caregivers in those facilities. By all accounts, Health and Human Services is doing a good job, Chris, of taking care of these children. What has been dumped on their plate by this administration, the children coming out of this building, is more kids than ever before. So there are 11,000 children currently in the care of Health and Human Services. Today, Kristen Nielsen said only about 1,000 of those have been separated from their parents. But if you extrapolate the rate at which these kids are coming out of this facility and going into that one, it'll be 20,000 by August. Why don't they want to show us yet where the girls are and where the toddlers are, what the toddlers' care looks like? People are genuinely concerned about these young children and just want to know that they're okay.
Let's talk about the heat down there. If they put these kids into tents, what about that? And by the way, side question, what do the PR people, the public affairs people tell you about the decision to let you see the older boys but not the other children? What do they tell you is their excuse for that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Chris. And I truly believe they want to get us in these places. They have not done it yet. They tell us that we'll get you in as soon as we open up one of these places for a tour. There's only a couple of them, and they're bouncing around the country from one of these to the other. Tornillo, this tent city, I believe, will be next on the list for us. That we're going to try to get into that tent city, tent camp is really the accurate way to call it, where the overflow crowds are being held right now. But look, if I was them, I'd make it a priority because the American people want to know. People are contacting me on social media every single day. Where are the girls? Where are the toddlers? It's something I'm hearing over and over. And if I was them, if I was sitting behind that desk, or if I was going around the country on these site surveys, it'd be the first thing I do to open up those facilities to show, despite what the Trump administration is doing, it's out of control of HHS. It's up to the President Trump, despite what he's doing, that these kids are well taken care of.
Well, they now know everything thanks to your reporting. We now know that they're separating kids by age and gender for PR reasons, not for humane reasons. Let me go to Peter on this one. Peter, what do you make of the front page impact here? I get the sense that this is the one time where Trump has cut down his coalition to a smaller number. They may be against illegal immigration, but not this cutting-edge stuff.
Yeah, it's striking that over the weekend you saw a critical mass begin to build of criticism that wasn't just from the left, but also from the right. Obviously, Laura Bush, the former First Lady, some senators like Susan Collins and Lindsey Graham, also the New York Post, conservative editorial page. And I think that was why you saw so many administration officials, starting with the president himself, out there today trying to push back, trying to defend themselves. They're on the defensive on immigration, which is a position they're not used to being, and they're trying to get back on the offense.
Do you think they're going to pull back on this policy of zero tolerance, which they basically put into effect without law? The law stayed the same. They went their direction. Will they change and give it up now that the heat's been on?
Well, it's an interesting question. You know, any other administration probably would have done that by today, just in, in the natural political course of things. That tape you played from ProPublica is obviously very powerful. The pictures that have come out of the region are very powerful. A normal political reaction would be to try to make those kind of pictures and audio go away. But that's not the way this president generally reacts. He doesn't like it to be pushed. He's using this, obviously, to push Congress to get legislation that he thinks is necessary to defend the border. But if it looks like a cynical ploy, that's one more piece of criticism from people even in his own party.
Thank you, Peter. Let me go to Jennifer on this. God's children, I open with that because they are God's children. Every religion believes that. Kids are kids we get from God. They come to us. We're responsible for looking out for them. They don't decide what country to live in. And we have to look out for them when they're here. And yet this is Trump's country. He keeps winning the PR wars. Will he win this one?
I don't think so. I think, speaking of religions, you have really every religious group out there, the Catholic bishops, Reformed Jews, Methodists.
Even Franklin Graham, my favorite.
Exactly.
Right.
Who's a big Trump supporter, condemning this and really condemning Sessions for trying to quote scripture in defense of this. I think Peter and the others are exactly right. I think the pictures and the sound are going to gnaw at Americans' heart. And listen, Ted Cruz doesn't make compromises on policy issues like immigration for nothing. He's doing it because Beto O'Rourke, who he's running against for Senate, went down to the border, had film taken of him sitting there with kids, talking to their parents, and now he's scared, so he's now introducing emergency legislation. You had Ben Sasse, who likes to write a lot of Facebook posts but doesn't do very much, saying that this policy is wicked. Will he join some type of policy initiative? So I think you're going to see some movement in Congress, and then Trump will try to take credit for it. But at this point, no one really cares who gets credit for it. The Republicans look awful, and they should look awful.
I think mothers especially.
Yes, absolutely.
I think I've just looked at it. You don't have to be a genius to see that the women like Laura Bush and Melania Trump are making some noise about this.
Absolutely.
This is for real. Thank you, Kristen Welker, for that great reporting and great in the action fighting in there to get the truth in that press room. Jacob Soboroff, you do this better than anybody, that on-scene reporting. It's the best there is. Peter Baker, I love the front page of the New York Times because of you. Jennifer Rubin, my colleague here.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.